Dustin and Stephen asked if I would come over this morning and read your questions. First off, I guess, Congressman, we're glad to have you here this morning. We've rolled out some snow for you, which unfortunately I guess we all had to deal with, but I guess there is hope. It's supposed to be in the 50s later in the week, so keep the faith. We want to get started? Are we good?
Let's do it.
Do you have anything that you want to say?
Well, I'm sure.
First here?
I'm sure we'll have some things to say here. Thanks for helping us with moderating and taking the questions. And it's a small enough group today. As questions come in, have other opportunities to ask it. And my staff will be picking up questions. If you have one, kind of raise it up so we don't neglect to get that. But welcome, good to see you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in this township hall, and it's part of the experience of a legislator. I think ought to be back to ask questions, get questions asked of, and report on what's going on. And so I'm glad to do it. We try to do an aggressive schedule of town hall meetings all over. I had one township meeting last Monday, and one person asked the question, says, why do you always go to out-of-the-way places where people can't get to? There was a room full of people. I said, how many of you are from this township area? 90% of the hands went up. I said, well, you were able to get here, and I don't necessarily take offense, but I kind of want to take offense to the fact that you call this an out-of-the-way place. This is where people live. These people have lives here. They love living here. This is their home area. So why would you call it out of the way and say that unless I go to larger cities like Jackson or Monroe, which we go to, that it's the wrong place to be. So I'm glad to be here today in the Brooklyn, Napoleon area, and don't think of it as an out-of-the-way place at all. In fact, I live in the suburbs of Tipton, so I suppose that's an out-of-the-way place. Or is it the suburbs of Onstead? I don't know, it's out in the country. So this was just a short hop, skip, and a jump for me today. And March comes in like a lion, right? Goes out like a lamb. We'll hope that's the case, but glad you're here. A lot of stuff is happening. If you hadn't noticed, a lot of good things are happening. And sadly, some of the bad things seem to quickly take the place of people understanding the good things that are happening. I mean, when you stop and think about it, the economy is as strong as it's been in an awful long time. In fact, the unemployment claims haven't been this low since 1969. That was the year I graduated from high school. That's a long time ago. We have the highest employment rate of African Americans and Hispanics in the history of the United States. That's a good thing. We look at what's resulted from the Tax Cut Jobs Act. Immense positives that have come on. Over 400 businesses have made public what they're doing in form of bonuses, pay increases, benefit increases, expansion of their facilities. I was just up a couple weeks ago in Delta Township in my district up near Lansing, meeting with the Cintas uniform people. And they had announced several things. Increased benefits for their employees, $1,000 raises for those that had been there for more than a year, $500 for those that were less, and a $17 million plant expansion facility, building a new facility. So those things are going on, and that's a very positive thing. Regulatory climate. We don't hear much about that unless you're in the small business world or manufacturing. The regulatory reforms that the President undertook since the beginning of his tenure in office, as well as the 14 Congressional Review Acts, regulatory changes, including mine, which was the 14th, have had huge impact. And the optimism that started even before the tax cut bill went through was palpable all across the nation and here in the 7th District as well. And then when people said that when the president was talking about North Korea and about the dictator of North Korea, you're going to get us into a nuclear war. This is not going to work out. Well, last week the president accepted an invitation to meet with the North Korean dictator. Now they're already talking about, will the president be prepared? Will he do the right thing? Are we going to get ourselves in trouble? So far the policies are working. And I would guess that the president will be prepared. We'll see if the dictator of North Korea is prepared, if he understands what it will be to meet with a country that I believe will tell him very clearly. Same old isn't around here anymore. You're going to live in this world as a proper actor, or you're going to suffer the consequences of it. So if you want to talk with me, if you want to negotiate with the United States, let's do it. Remember, the U.S. is going to come out on top on this one for our country. And we want your country to come out strong as well, and your people to not continue to experience the results of your dictatorship. It's destroying their lives, destroying their opportunity, starving them to death, and all the like. So I'm delighted, even with the rough edges, and I don't deny there are rough edges with this president, but he was elected, unbelievably so to a lot of people, because he was a disruptor. And he's carried it out. And everything he's doing right now, he told us he would do. And the policy is working. So we're excited about those things. Now there are other things, we can talk about that today. The shooting that went on in Florida, the school. Don't forget about the shooting that went on in Sutherland Springs, Texas church as well, or Las Vegas. All with different settings, all with different uses, or weapons that were used. But still with a mindset of individuals in those three cases. We could look back further as well, that we didn't deal with appropriately when signs were given. And so we need to talk about a much bigger issue than just simply gun control. We have a constitution here in the United States until changed. The first 10 amendments are our Bill of Rights. That includes the Second Amendment. So we have to think rationally. And I think, as I heard I believe she was 16-year-old from the school in Florida, interviewed, and the commentator said, do you think we ought to, and he listed off all of the talking points that are out there, the ideas and how to handle this situation. And she said, well, yeah, we ought to talk about all those things, but the first thing we ought to do, because it'll take a long time to get all that other stuff dealt with, but we can do something immediately in securing our schools. I think that was a wise statement from a 16-year-old. So let's move on with your questions, and I'll turn to you, and when we run out of those, we'll just talk around the room, I guess.
Do some more, huh?
Yeah.
I have a magnifying glass. I've got some eye issues that, so anyhow, let me deal with this this way. This question is from Ella. Is the tax break going to help the retirees or just the rich people? The examples all show families and working people.
Yeah. No, it helps everybody. Well, let me say it this way. So far, it's proven to be correct that over 90% of the people in the United States, including retirees, get benefit from this. If you have a pension, that's taxed. In the state, it is taxed. But if you have some other benefits that come in that through your investments, all of it has benefit to you in the tax plan. Of course, we went after trying to earmark the middle class taxpayer first and foremost. That was the effort. On the other side, decrying about it all through the months leading up to the December vote, and then following, saying this was not going to work for the middle class. It was just for the rich people and corporations. We found out that isn't true. How it's working out is exactly as we indicated it would be. That the middle class was barreled in on to try to make sure that they felt significant impact at their level. And then the security that came from having opportunity for increased viability of corporations and small businesses, S-corps, pass-throughs, all of that added to the benefit there. But when the economy is growing, the very first thing that will happen for someone on Social Security, you don't see any cost of living increase. What we've seen has been paltry for the last number of years. I'm on Medicare, not on Social Security yet, still working, happily working, but I'm on Medicare. When I talk to people who are on Social Security and Medicare, any cost of living increase that they got, now it's twice during the last 4 years, that's all. The benefit they received was taken away by the increase in Medicare. The only way we change that is change the formula of how we compute cost of living increases for senior citizens. But more importantly, we grow the economy, because it's tied. The cost of living increase is tied to economic growth. And it's projected right now that we will have at least the 3%, if not 3.5% GDP growth during the course of this next year. That on what took place in the preceding 10 years, which averaged less than 2%, about 1.5%, 1.7% increase. 3% will be stagnant in comparison. That's a growth in the economy. So, I think across the board, 90% plus of people will see benefit as a result of, and are seeing benefit as a result of the tax cut.
If people don't mind, we have three cards here so far dealing with gun control, and maybe we can lump all of these together and
let's try it.
Make a broader conversation than just some of the specifics that people are interested in here. The first is from Avis, and she says, "We please continue to support right to carry." That's one of the concerns. The other is, what are you going to do to protect the people from all these shootings at school? Is the answer allowing teachers to have guns, or will this hinder the police as they might not know who is a teacher? And the third one is from John. It says, can we have government pay for an officer in all of Jackson County schools? Many of our teachers are female. The idea of having to take someone's life is very scary and overwhelming. So those are the crux of the gun questions to date.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Second Amendment supporter, not simply because I take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution. That's pretty important. But I think it makes common sense as well. I think that's why it was put in the Constitution by the original framers. When people say, well, it was a different time and different place. Well, yeah, but people haven't changed. And people will still do bad things if allowed to do it. Of course, our government was set up on a whole concept very different from the rest of the world, in that we were set up to be self-governing. And as the framers said, our Constitution and our form of government is wholly unsuitable to a people that will not govern themselves and be governed by God. That was their premise, and I believe that's true. And we've gotten away from that, so the culture is an issue with this violence that's going on, whether it's gun or knives or machetes or cars or trucks or IEDs. We have to do some cultural changing as well. We just don't take things away or make laws and say that does it. I think we have to get back to some solid values about life itself, the importance of and the sanctity of life. And we live in a nation that has taken almost 60 million innocent babies through abortion. That says something about our understanding of the sanctity of life. That has to change. When we condone the sale of and encourage young people in watching these violent video games where they get more points by being more violent. We say that education matters, and education is caught, in many cases more than taught. We need to think about those things as well. But I'll continue to support the Second Amendment. I support concealed carry, and that's not going to change. As far as what we do in schools, or in movie theaters, or in churches, I think that ought to be a local decision, but the locals ought to have freedom to make that decision. I think the Napoleon schools ought to be able, with their school board, their teachers, their administrators, the parents, make a decision in the best interest of the kids. If they don't, shame on them. And if that means training certain teachers who volunteer and are willing to take a very significant course, we're not talking about just a CPL course. We're talking about a course that police and military would take in preparation for an active shooter. If they voluntarily will offer themselves to do that, and the school district is willing to train them or have them trained, so be it. Not every school will need that. Maybe schools would do well just simply hardening the ability to get into the school building by putting monitoring systems, a buzzer entry system. I don't think all schools need to be an armed camp. But where there would be viability and need, I think schools ought to be allowed to do that. Again, please hear me out. I'm not advocating teachers be armed. I'm advocating school districts doing what's necessary to protect the kids that we as parents or grandparents entrust to their keeping. So whatever that takes, you know, you stop and think about it. Detroit school system, Chicago public school system, we can name several others, are not gun-free zones in the school. There are gun-carrying security in all of those schools. We haven't heard of a mass shooting in the Chicago public school system or the Detroit public school system. There are shootings all around the school, sadly. But these people who want to go in for whatever reason and shoot up a school are generally cowards. If they know it is not a gun-free zone and they will be engaged, they stay away from it. So I hope I've made myself clear there. I'm not advocating anything but do what's necessary to protect your schools. Do what's necessary to protect churches. I know churches all over this district that have a security detail, some of which are armed, because of the shootings that they've seen go on in other places, including Sutherland Springs. They're not going to let that happen in a church. Movie theaters, we don't have it. We might need to think about that too. But that's why I say we have to get back to a broader picture of how do we get back to the values that keep us away from doing those things, or keep those few people. We need background checks that are done as they're outlined in law right now, but done completely. When you have the Air Force not reporting the criminal violations of a discharged Air Force officer who goes out and ultimately goes to Sutherland Springs and shoots up that church, why wasn't the NICS system notified of this guy's problem? Why was he able to even get a gun? So those kind of things can be fixed, and we have legislation now working its way through the Senate that would do those things. It would deal with fixing the holes in the NICS system. It would give the ability through federal grants to local school districts to train their staff, if necessary, train them on how to handle something like this. And ultimately do away with bump stocks. Those things I think we can all countenance without taking away the rights of the majority, overwhelming majority of law-abiding citizens who have guns, weapons for hunting, for target, for recreation, or for personal protection, and have never and will never use it in an illegal way. Did I get all those questions?
I think you did.
Want to add to that?
Police departments now have shotgun shells that shoot tasers. If you had shotguns with the teachers that shot tasers, that weren't going to kill them. Just knock them down and take the weapon away from them. They'd be more likely to pull the trigger. You give a teacher a gun to point at a child, he's going to hesitate because he can't pull the trigger. The kid's going to kill him. But if you give the teacher shotguns with tasers in them, they wouldn't have to worry about psychological ramifications of it.
Well, that's again the local district. Let them decide. There's all sorts of choices out there. The issue is, we had all sorts of reasons to make sure that Nick Cruz didn't get in that school and didn't even have a weapon. He had done things that were illegal already. And because of a goofy colleague letter that was put out by the last administration, encouraging school districts not to put kids into the prison system or the correction system for violations, this kid got away with murder. Multiple times, law enforcement agents knew about a problem with this kid. Multiple times, social workers were given reason to believe this kid was a danger. Videos showing him brandishing a weapon in his yard were out on the social media. We let it happen. So again, local school districts, local communities ought to take due consideration, do what's necessary. If it's taser, fine, if they decide that's the way to go. If it's a water cannon, it's the way to go. If it's smoke bombs put in the ceilings, they have those up that fill the hallway with smoke. If it's locking doors on each classroom, and there are systems that I've seen built in my district that are very simple, work very well, and could handle much of that situation, fine, but make that decision. But don't blame it simply on one thing, that being the gun, or an age of 21. Because the other two shootings we talked about this morning were not done by teenagers. So, you can never forget our cultural setting as well. We need to return to some solid roots. Because many of us were in school situations growing up where we knew there were shotguns in lockers or in trunks of cars by school kids that hunted on the way to school and hunted afterwards. And there was no shooting up classmates in the school. And we know that one of the first incidences of mass shooting on a campus was at that Texas tower at the university. And he was shooting a sniper gun, single shot, picking people off until they found out where he was. Again, going back to what would cause a person to do that. What do we do in society to try to stop that? Get ourselves back on center, not just thinking about ourselves. To thy own self be true, I'm number one. But getting back to considering others. Maybe the golden rule.
Complex set of issues, and here's another one. It's obviously in the press a lot. This is from Sam, and Sam says, what's your stand on sanctuary cities and defunding them?
I'm against them, and I like to defund them from anything that goes toward criminal justice in those sanctuary cities. Let them deal with it themselves. Now, the court systems thus far, made up in many cases by liberal justices who are not rule of law justices or judges or strict constructionists of the Constitution justices, but we're going to make law ourselves, are causing us problems there. But there is only one immigration law, because there's only one country we're dealing with. That's the United States of America. The federal government has authority, and we only have authority for that. California doesn't have authority for it, even though they are trying to take it. I mean, if I found out that there was going to be a drug bust in the parking lot of Napoleon schools an hour from now, and I walked out to my car, or my staff's car, to be accurate, and I made a phone call to a particular student who I knew probably would be at that drug bust, and said, hey, I just want to warn you, Napoleon police are going to be over there shortly to do a bust, so get away. If that was found out by the Napoleon law enforcement, would I be held accountable for that? You bet I would. Aiding and abetting in a criminal activity and obstructing justice, at least for starters. There may be other charges that would be brought against me. So we can have a mayor of Oakland, California, inform potentially MS-13 gang members, get out of the way, and stop ICE. Denver is stopping ICE from carrying out their responsibility and getting a guy who killed a trucker, let him burn to death in his truck, and fled the scene. I mean, this is ridiculous. That's why the federal government has a responsibility for protecting our borders and carrying out immigration laws. So, sanctuary cities, number one, they aren't legal. Number two, if they try to act that way, let's take away their support until they cry uncle and get with the rest of the country and live by the law. Was I direct enough on that one?
Okay, let's try Social Security. How are you going to protect Social Security for the people collecting today and also for the future retirees, our children, grandchildren, and everybody pays for this, shouldn't run dry.
Yeah, we all pay into it. If we have FICA that shows up on our pay stub, as I do, that means we paid into it, whether we like it or not. I personally would much rather not ever been on Social Security and taken that money and invested it myself in the ups and downs times over the period of time that I've been working. I think I've been doing a lot better than Social Security will provide for me. But that's not the choice. We have to pay into it. So it's a promise made, it's a promise that needs to be kept. And I'll turn directly to the trackers, video camera there, and I'll say that. Social Security is a promise to be kept, not broken. And we need to find a way to make sure that that promise is kept. I have a lockbox bill that would require any dollars put into Social Security Trust Fund be used for only purpose for Social Security or Medicare. That's it. And I'd love to have the opportunity for the Senate to take that up, and send it to the President, because it's a good bill. It's just one step. Secondly, we need to make sure that we do what's necessary to secure Social Security now, whatever that is, for those that are on it or soon to be on it. When you're in your reach 50 years of age, you don't have much time to develop a retirement savings plan that'll take the place of losing Social Security if that were to happen. So we need to be serious about, I'll get to you, don't want your arm to go to sleep. We need to be serious about that. So every time, start it again, Democrats, and I'll name them. Democrats are saying the Republicans are going to take your Social Security away. That's BS. My mother would be glad that I said BS. It's absolutely false. I mean, do people really believe that Republicans won't be on Social Security? Do people really believe that Republicans don't have elderly parents that are on Social Security and don't care if they lose that? Do people really believe that Paul Ryan wants to put grandmother over the cliff? But that's what you'll see coming out. And that's the reason why it's been almost impossible to touch that so-called third rail and fix it for all these years. We've known what's going to happen if we don't step in and say, number one, stop using the trust fund for nefarious purposes as a slush fund to aid and abet overspending in Congress. Number two, let's get our workplace going again for all able-bodied people, so all able-bodied people are working and contributing into the system so that Grandma and Grandpa will receive dollars that continue to fund it, and Mom and Dad will know that when they're there, they will have funding, and then the younger kids will have that too. So build the economy, build the incentive for people to work, able-bodied, employable adults working, contributing into the system, and then look for a better approach that gives people who aren't even employed yet the ability to say, there is a choice that I have for the future that will impact me better than a Social Security Medicare system that was never intended to be as large as it was. And you just have to read Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his writings on why he pushed Social Security as just an addition to what people would have for their retirement savings on their own. And so I think we have to look at the whole perspective of it. But number one, promise made, promise be kept. I support that, and I'm willing to fight for that. And I hope that there are citizens out there that will dispel the rumor and the notion that one party is going to take it away from you. You know, like I said, I'm on Medicare. I like the fact I'm on Medicare, but I'm on Medicare. I'm glad I lived to this age, and I hope I live longer as well. But I think there are better ways of dealing with all of the above. But for right now, we've made promises, we better keep them. Yes, sir?
Okay, I'll go back to the beginning. You were talking about Social Security. When it was originally set up, Social Security was supposed to take care of itself. Any interest was supposed to keep rolling into it. But then I don't remember what year it was, but the federal government started taking money out of the Social Security. When will it start paying it back? When will you start paying it back?
Well, that's where my lockbox comes in. First, you stop the drain. You say, no, you can't do that. And then you start stopping the deficit spending that goes on and the debt that's incurred and increased. Then you grow the economy and you get more people working, because it only works if there are more people paying into it than taking out. And we're getting very close to the point that will have less people paying into it than taking out. That's a concern. Do we need to raise the age? Do we need to raise the allocation, or what's taken? Do we need to find another mechanism for younger employees so that we don't worry about them, but the system remains in place to take care of those, as I said, who are on it or soon to be on it? But it still comes with disciplining Congress to not spend everything that comes in. I've said that about the tax cut. We've had tax cuts, they've worked in every case they've been done. Starting with John F. Kennedy, going on through Reagan, and Bush, and Clinton, and now with Trump. But it was only under Kennedy that we did one other thing. After the tax cuts resulted in increased revenue for the federal government because the economy grew, Congress didn't spend it all. They built in some protections. They gave some more back to the people. But ever since then, when we've seen those tax cut benefits go, Congress has spent it. And that hurts Social Security as well. So myself and a good number of my colleagues in the House have been really speaking strongly to our colleagues, saying, as we see these benefits, let's look for further ways to not spend it, but to pay down our debt. That's the only way we're going to pay it down. We can't cut enough taxes or increase enough taxes and cut enough spending to take care of a $20 trillion debt. We've got to grow the economy and then control ourselves, discipline ourselves. That's the only way it's going to happen. Again, my lockbox is a good start to slow that trend down and say, don't touch it. You can't touch it.
Okay, another hot topic. How do you feel about special counsels, Mueller? And should there be a second special counsel to investigate corruption toward Trump? And I assume that means the Russian dossier and all of that.
I think Mueller, for the most part, has done a very credible job. I'm beginning to wonder what directions he's going now. But on the Russian investigation, specifically the dossier, it's turned around, and now it's become more apparent that it was the dossier was, number one, commissioned and paid for by the Democrats and Hillary Clinton, and then it was used in lying to the FISA court justices and not telling the full background of where that material came from. And whether the FISA court would have looked at it then or not, nobody knows. They may have. But they were violated by not being told who paid for that dossier and its development. So I think right now, as a result of the memos, a result of seeing what's going on, it's showing that, number one, that what we knew and what the last administration knew was taking place, and has been taking place in our country and other countries, that Russia's been trying to interact and to have impact on elections across the free world. It's also shown that there is no evidence that any of that Russian interaction had any impact on the outcome of our elections in any state, including Michigan. Whether or not we need, Trey Gowdy has been asking now for a second special counsel to look at some other issues relative to Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the involvement and the improprieties there, remains to be seen. But I think we have in Congress Intelligence Committee that's been doing work itself, and sadly it's become extremely partisan now. I don't say that the Mueller investigation, and the President hasn't said that it should be ended, but I think it ought to stay on track to what it was originally intended to do. So far it's been helping the President. Next question.
Let's try this one. When will the wall be built?
Okay, I'm going to share my bitterness. We jokingly say around Congress that in the House that while the other party is our opposition, the Senate's our enemy. And it truly has become an enemy to us. It's become an enemy to you as well. 76% now, as of today, 76% of all the bills, over 500 bills, that we've sent out of the House to the Senate during the normal legislative process, most of those being bipartisan bills, 76% of those bills still reside in the Senate with no action taken on it. Now, some of those bills we can live without, but on September 14th, we sent an entire 12-bill appropriations package to the Senate, on time, in budget. And because of Chuck Schumer's filibuster using cloture vote requirement, a Senate rule that ought to be done away with. If you want to have a filibuster, then you better stand and talk for 48 hours or whatever it takes, and then sit down and shut up and go to the bathroom and let the vote be taken. But when you can just require a cloture vote, which takes 60 votes, knowing that the Republicans have 51 votes, so they need 9 more votes to get to 60, you've got a problem. So you have an entire appropriations package that funds everything in government in an appropriate way, passed in a bipartisan fashion in the House, but won't be debated in the Senate. And the question, specific question was, go back to that question.
We did the wall, is that correct?
Oh, the wall, when we fund the wall. The wall was funded in that appropriations package. Now the wall consists of a wall or a fence at the appropriate spot, or electronic surveillance at other spots where it makes sense. We're talking about border security. And that's what the President gets that. It was easy during the campaign and easy when he talks to say a wall. There's certain places it'd be stupid to waste money on a wall when you got 50-foot cliffs that nobody's climbing up over right now. But you also have land, federal land, that we can't put ICE agents on, or Customs and Border Control agents on. And they've got to be 50 miles back from the Rio Grande in certain spots because the law won't allow them to go on Bureau of Land Management lands. Now, how stupid is that? So, In some of those cases, just doing that would impact a wall, as it were, in security. Our funding is there for it. And the President wants to sign it. So we'll be doing it through omnibuses and continuing resolutions, but the wall is still progressing, and decisions are being made on what is needed, what type of wall. You've seen pictures of that, and that's moving forward. We also funded that wall back in 2007, 2008, at that time, and those dollars haven't been expended yet. So we have resources, we can start it, and then as the bills move through, if the Senate ever gets their act together, we will have the funding for the full wall.
Okay, this one I don't understand.
Talk to our senators, 2 of them, Peters and Stabenow. Talk to them.
This one is beyond me, but I'm sure you know about it. But what exactly is real ID, and why do we need it?
Well, real ID, I mean, you can look at it various ways. Real ID is just basically having an ID card that's based upon firm fact of who you are, and it will be useful for whatever purpose it's to be used for. Voting, I mean, I'm not going to take a show of hands, but I think the majority of people in this room would appreciate knowing that the only ones that are allowed to vote in our country are actually citizens of this country with the right and responsibility of voting. And so to be able to determine that, to have an ID shown that costs nobody anything. I mean, in this state, we will give you a free citizen's ID card if you don't have a driver's license, and you need an ID card to vote or otherwise. So when people say that's restricting the vote, why? If I'm not willing to have my mug put on an ID card and attest to the fact that I am who I say I am, and I am legally allowed to do whatever it is, that's my problem. What am I hiding? Proud to show you my driver's license or my member's voting card with my face on it saying, I'm Tim Walberg and I can attest to that fact. And if that's what you want me to show for me to vote, or to get a permit to get a gun or whatever else, yeah, I'll show it to you. That's all we're asking. Because right now we have incursion of people who are coming in, and we have nefarious individuals who give them fake ID cards, fake Social Security, etc. And they're using our system without having a legal right to. So that's all real ID is. It's backed up on computer systems, it's verified, and it comes under clear penalty of law if it's done in a legal way.
But that's a federal system, not a state.
That would be a federal system. A federal system. Again, only governmental authority that has responsibility and authority for our borders and all that goes on in getting into our borders and experiencing the benefit of the American way is the federal government. That's one thing we do have. We've stepped into plenty of other areas where we shouldn't be. Whether it's in commerce or education or energy or etc. We've stepped into areas where we probably shouldn't be. At least the Constitution doesn't give us authority to do it. But in immigration, securing our borders, we have that authority.
There are a couple of questions here regarding closure and coming up with some other method to eliminate halting legislation. Why don't we utilize the current laws to do more of this?
So you're talking about closure?
Yes.
Closure is a Senate rule. Only the Senate can change it. And we've been browbeating senators, Republicans in my case, including Mitch McConnell. And it got fairly aggressive in our annual planning conference that we had. If you remember, the train wreck that was reported. That was our planning conference weekend. And the first discussion we had was relative to Mitch McConnell, why? Why does a cloture vote still continue? And it was frustrating to hear him and some other senators defend him. as necessary and say this. Someday, if we're back in the minority, we will wish for cloture vote. Well, my response to senators who have said that to me is, then you're already a minority. You're already a minority. I believe if you do what you said you were going to do and why you got elected, and you do that, you'll be reelected. And if not, well, that's how the system works. But to have an arbitrary, artificial blockage in place so one person can shut down the entire action on legislation that people have asked for. They've asked for a budget that was balanced, that took on not only the discretionary of our budget, but the mandatory area of budget, which we can only take on if the president can sign it. Discretionary we can take care of. But mandatory, that's made on law. So to reprioritize mandatory areas of our budget, it takes a presidential signature. And so we take the senators back to history. Number one, when our U.S. government began, there was no such thing as filibuster. The Senate had no requirements on their debate as we have in the House. In the House we can restrict the amount of time on debate. You have to with 435 members. You can never get anything done if we could just debate until the cows come home. But the Senate, being 100 members, they were given the opportunity to debate, but they had to stand and debate. So when, shortly after Aaron Burr shot Hamilton in the duel, that's when the filibuster began as an actual rule. But the filibuster required that the senator would stand and talk until he or she could not talk anymore. And then filibuster was ended, and he went on for a vote. But then in the I think it was 74, 75, they changed it to cloture, where you don't have to stand and talk, you just sign a request for a cloture vote, non-debatable, so then it's required 60 votes. So you can stop anything, unless you get 60 votes. And that's why I say talk to our senators. Tell them to speak for the good of the people and go against Chuck Schumer and say, no, we're going to be 2 of those extra 9 votes after a certain time to let things come up. The budget, the appropriations process is one of those things that shouldn't be shut down. We have not had a complete appropriations process for 14 years. That's wrong. The House has passed full appropriations bills now for 3 successive years running, and it doesn't go anywhere in the Senate. So we're going to keep working on that, because it violates the trust of the American people. People's will is not carried out. And even if we get some things through that they don't like, then they can tell us in the election next time. But if you don't debate it, you don't end up voting on it, then how can that work to the good?
That voting part, that's part of the process. Here's a question that says, how do we put a stop to deficit spending? I see no use or no end to wasteful, unconstitutional spending. Examples are given, such as NPR, National Endowment for the Arts, and some others. And shouldn't these be funded by private or corporate donations instead of the federal government?
Yeah, we can look at a number of those things and say that at least they ought to be debated. But when you can't get a 12-bill package that has those programs in it, either reduced or extended, some repealed, and you can't get the Senate to take it up for debate and ultimately amend it, change it, send it back to us, we then take it to conference committee, we iron out the differences like we did the tax bill, and then send it to the president for signing or veto. You don't get those things done. Again, just as brief as I possibly can be, we have 2 parts of our budget. We have a discretionary part, which we can change, replace by just removing things from the budget. They aren't laws. They've been put in as part of agency involvements. They've been put in by the House and Senate. We can do that discretionary budget, but that's only 40% of our budget. 60% of our budget is mandatory. That's done by laws, like the Affordable Care Act. The president signed, it's a law. And until we can repeal or reform that law, it stays as is, unless we get it to the president. And so that's 60% of our budget, which is mandatory, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that goes with that. the Affordable Care Act, and numerous other things we can't touch. And that's the challenge that's there. So deficit spending, even though since 2011 we have not deficit spent in the discretionary area because of the Ryan Murray budget agreement. Patty Murray, a Democrat senator, Paul Ryan, a Republican House member, both chairs of the budget committee at that time in 2011, came to an agreement. And so since then we've kept our discretionary spending at 2011 levels. It's not deficit. We need to do that with the mandatory area. And that's why this filibuster or cloture is so terrible. It doesn't let us get our changes to the president and start reducing the deficit, at the very least deficit spending at the mandatory area.
Robert asked a question, and I'm going to learn something because I don't know what jump and dump laws are. And is there any chance of changing them?
I'm not sure I know what jump and dump laws are either.
The very fact that people can come across that border and have a child automatically a citizen while they are not, when it is just purely a ploy to obtain citizenship outside of the normal process. I think that's ridiculous.
That's the first time I've heard that nomenclature. We have an immigration process in this country that's made up of laws. We have an illegal immigration problem in this country because we haven't followed the laws. And I mean, it goes way back. Reagan, I think, got suckered into agreeing to $5 million 5 million illegals staying in this country, giving him amnesty, making clear that this would be the last time that that would be done. Well, it hasn't been. And now we have DACA recipients done by a president who 17 times said he couldn't do that, and Congress needed to do it. Make a decision on what we have as individuals who've come in allegedly through no fault of their own, primarily young kids who were brought by their parents or someone else and had no choice, and now have been here most all of their life up to this point in time. All of this is in place because we didn't follow the laws that are presently on the books. And we hear people decrying Attorney General Sessions and ICE and Customs and Border now who are carrying out the law. And in certain cases, was that yours?
I'm sorry.
I heard the Harley. I thought it was mine at first. That's my wake up alarm. It sounds like a Harley starting up. Yeah, it's a good sound. So I guess going to that, when you have the 14th Amendment, for instance, being used for anchor babies, that was never intended for anchor babies. That nomenclature was intended for freeborn slaves. And these people didn't come as slaves. They were brought, and so automatically, because they're born here, they become a citizen. That was never intended, but the courts thus far have ruled it that way, and we're stuck with it. But now that you see that the Attorney General, they're using the laws, they're enforcing them, and we have some sad situations, not because of the Attorney General or the Justice Department or ICE or Customs enforcing the laws. We have sad situations because we didn't, and now people have been here for sometimes years, illegally, but never pushed. And so that's why we've got to deal with it. And we've got to get back to a place where we say, we welcome immigrants. We welcome you to come, but you're going to come legally. You're going to come through a gate that swings wide and free, but you'll sign the guest book. You'll abide by our laws. You'll speak our language. You'll matriculate into being Americans, because if you don't want to be Americans, you just want to be on the continent and still carry on your own life, go back to where you came from. Say that very clearly. We'd love to have you if you want to experience America and be an American, like my grandmother and my father, who didn't have a choice, came over. But he was glad Grandma came, and she said, "There are Americans who no longer speak. God bless America." "No, Timmy, I'm not going to teach you Swedish." Now, I wish she would have taught me a little bit of Swedish. I could have used it on a few occasions. But we want Americans. And so that's why in the Good Lat bill that we're working on right now, that I've co-sponsored, and hopefully will be voted on in the House in the not too distant future, hopefully in the next several weeks, it does a number of things. One, it says that those DACA recipients, those 700,000 that have not committed acts of crime, they've kept their noses clean, they've been part of America, we're going to let you stay in a legal status, not as citizens. But every 3 years, you're going to reapply. If there's no reason why you shouldn't get it, you'll get it again. And then at about 10 years, then and only then, after keeping clean, abiding by the system, then at that point you can use the normal route, not a special route, but a normal route to be a citizen if you want to do that. We're not going to have diversity visas. That's not how America's done it. Just we've let it happen. If you're legal, if you add to this gene pool in this country, you meet all those requirements, then you come as a citizen. We don't just do it because now we need a quota here. We need this number of people, or we need this particular group of people. No. That'll be done away with, and we'll also do away with the chain migration. Nuclear family, yes, but Uncle Louie, third cousin removed, no. That's not the way we're working. That's the basic guts of that bill, and I think it addresses the concerns that you expressed, and it puts us back on a legal format. Pertaining to that question?
Isn't the E-Verify part of that as well?
Some type of E-Verify would be part of that for work issues. We don't want employers employing illegals, but we don't want to put the burden on the employer. We want the government to say, if you did everything possible to hire a legal documented worker after following the law and trying to hire a citizen first, whether it's on the dairy farm or whether it's a construction crew, or whether it's picking tomatoes or whatever. Tried to hire the American citizen first. Can't get that, then you're going to get legal immigrant labor, and an E-Verify system will be in place for that. So if there's a mistake, it's not the employer, it's the government that screwed up. If that card is shown to them.
Unless the lawyer or the employer breaks the law.
Unless the employer breaks the law, then we go after them.
Okay.
They should have no reason to break the law if they're going to be legal. So
This goes back, this question, excuse me, goes back to a little earlier discussion. Will the Clintons and the Obama administration officials have been investigated for the many felonies they have committed while holding public office?
Oh my gosh.
well, I think some are being investigated right now, especially with Hillary Clinton and a number of things. And that's where Trey Gowdy and a few others have called for a special prosecutor there, a special counsel there to continue that investigation, because the more Mueller brings up, the dirtier the Clinton campaign and the candidate herself become. You would know more about that if the media were to cover it. But that's actually taking place. As far as going back to Bill Clinton, some things are water over the dam. We'll see.
There's a very nice comment here. Actually, just want to say thank you for all you do. It's greatly appreciated. You do all the work and walk the walk.
I appreciate my staff putting that in, right? Dustin, thank you.
I think Dustin saved this one till last.
Okay. Is that the last one?
There are two others.
Let's get those two then.
There are two others here. This one deals with the road condition in Michigan.
Let's not get that one.
Yeah.
Let's get it.
And what you're going to do to fix Michigan roads.
I think it's up to Michigan. I mean, we have to pass an infrastructure bill. we passed a Highway Trust Fund Act reauthorization a year and a half ago, signed by President Obama. It gave our states and our local road commissions a clear understanding of what the federal dollar is going to be for them. We also have an infrastructure proposal that the President is pushing very strongly. No concrete details on it yet, but it's going to be some significant dollars, but it's also going to do something I appreciate. You see what the percentages are. It's going to say they're going to be federal dollars, but there's going to be a state or local match in certain cases in order to get those federal dollars. Why do I appreciate that? Because when it costs us something in Michigan, then we're going to have to decide what our priorities are. If we're going to stick them on bicycle paths, and I like bicycles, and my wife and I ride bicycle paths a lot. I'd rather be on my Harley with a motor in between the two wheels, but I enjoy bicycling as well. But in a time when we have bridges crumbling and being ready to shut down, we have roads full of potholes and tires and rims stuck in those potholes. When we have infrastructure underground, with sewer systems, drainage, etc., and water pipelines. And when we have communities like I live in that doesn't have cable or broadband infrastructure in place, we've got to set priorities for the best interest of our citizens that make sense and not just everything we want to put into it, including turtle fences on the west part of the state. So I think that's where the President is right in saying, yeah, we'll be sending in money, but show us what you're going to do with it first and how you're going to match that. Because we're going to have a project that is truly shovel-ready, and you get it done before we move on to something else. I kind of like that. Now, we're going to certainly have the debate on it, but infrastructure is important. But again, the federal government did what we were supposed to do with the Highway Trust Fund reauthorization. So the states can't say they don't know what they have from the feds thus far. What additionally they get is what the question is. And I think we need to be looking at how things are done all around the world. The Autobahn, you can go over 100 miles an hour on that. They have freeze-thaw as well. And yet you don't have the potholes that you have here. So it's time to start doing some quality control. And I'm not a highway engineer, so I'm not going to go too far into that. But we shouldn't have to put up with these roads like we have here every cotton picking year, especially after the orange cones go up and we get a nice smooth road. A year and a half later, we're bumping on it again. Something's wrong.
There's one more, and these are more statements than they are questions. I don't know how we deal with this. Maybe we get the individual involved. But the statement is organ donors, 3 hearts on the license, red for donors, blue for non-donor, and yellow for donor to donor.
It sounds like it's a state issue with a state license. So I would leave that to our state house members and senators on how to do that. It sounds like organ donor. Was that your question?
Okay, what do you do to take care of the VA veterans that come back with different problems? Not just a DA view. What do you do to help us?
We've done a lot to help the veterans. And what's been done in the last couple of years, veterans ought to be very, very happy with. Number one, we've taken on the Veterans Administration. We've put through laws that I co-sponsored that dealt with removing senior executive officials, putting them under the same requirements as the normal civil service guy or gal. So when they mess up, like we saw in recent years with records and waiting lists where people were dying on, they lost their jobs for that. We're continuing to work in those areas and trying to deal with the red tape issues. We're giving more opportunities and choices for veterans in their medical care. The CHOICE Act is a good step forward. We found some problems with it. We're working on making that work, but we want to make sure that veterans have the care that they need and can get it where they can get it, and not just be consigned to one system that's in place. Mental health, we've done some significant increase in funding as well as authorizations for mental health care. In our Century 21 Cures, or 21st Century Cures Act, we had a large mental health component that was put in that affects all citizens as well as veterans. We'll keep working at that. It's a big system, and I think that is another reason why we want to make sure that when we move to full healthcare reform, we do a patient-centered approach and not a one-size-fits-all. Well, I want to say thank you for coming here today. Thanks for the questions and comments and concerns. We do it this way because it works best. There are some people that say we ought to just have an open free-for-all. We used to, but then it began to get so boisterous that we couldn't get through but 2 or 3 questions or concerns. So we had to move this card system. We'd like today, moderate it a bit and allow follow-up questions. But the most important thing I would leave with you is that we are all Americans, blessed to be born, raised, or in, however it is with you, the best country on the face of the earth, bar none. We've got our problems. But I don't think there are any problems that should divide us to the point that we can't talk to each other, that we become disagreeable with each other. And what you hear in the media about the ugly disagreements going on in Congress, I tell you what, I don't see that. I see Democrats and Republicans, by and large, able to work together, talk together, eat together, negotiate together. And sadly, the news media doesn't make ratings on talking about that. So they go for the outliers. In our country, we have a minimal number of people, minority of people who want to disrupt our normal congeniality in this country. We want to talk about all the negatives and don't want to labor on the positives that are happening and why, in most cases, this is about as optimistic as I've heard in the last 15 years as I go around to businesses and community events, etc. So let's continue to thank God that we're in America, be Americans, accept disagreements that we have and diversity of opinion at times, but commit ourselves to be part of the solution as opposed to just being a loud voice that tries to disrupt and move on. And I thank you for being part of that today. I appreciate the congeniality that went on here as well, though I know that we all didn't agree. I saw that on the faces in certain cases. But that's okay. If my wife were here, she probably wouldn't agree with everything either. And she's in Africa with 2 of our granddaughters, and daughter and son-in-law right now, and I sent them a picture of the snow this morning. They were having rain and 90-degree weather. So anyway, thanks for being here, and keep praying for America, keep doing your best, and I think we'll come out of this pretty well.